I should move, not the camera should move. I get it. I understand. Okay, you forgive me. Good morning, ladies, and the few gentlemen that are not really here. Good morning. Today we have been asked to dedicate the Shiur in memory of Mas'uda Bat Le'ah, and that's the mother of Florence Silverstein. Her Askara is tonight and tomorrow, and so we hope that by dedicating these Divrei Torah, that her neshama should have aliyah, should go higher and higher. So, the goal of today's talk is to revolutionize our understanding of Shivasar B'Tammuz. Now, most of us did not look forward to it. It's the longest ta'anit of the year, at least in daytime hours, because it's longer than Tisha B'Av and it's longer than Kippur. You know why? Because it is closer to the summer solstice, I think, which is June 21st, and so we're closer. So it's a very, very, very long ta'anit, and many of us are already looking forward to the end of the ta'anit, but in the meantime, we are here. A while ago, I gave a shiur, I think it was on Purim, where I kind of gave a book report about the wonderful sefer that I had discovered quite by accident, and I started reading it, and I got so excited about it, I contacted the author, we started writing back and forth, and he tells me that that's not my only book. I have one on called The Darkness and the Dawn, and it's by Rabbi Daniel Gladstein. And in here he talks about Shivasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av and some of the other times of Ben HaMitzarim and the Holocaust Memorial. And so I also today want to do another book report. I kind of was, it's so refreshing when you read something and you say, yes, that makes sense. Yes, I know that. And then you know two different things and he connects them for you that you never connected. So I was excited about that. So hopefully my book report called The Darkness and the Dawn by Rabbi Daniel Gladstein, hopefully I'll be able to do justice to a few of the sections that he talks about in this book. And I'll leave this around later if you want to get the name of it and write it down. He's got about 3 or 4 in the series and they're all worthwhile. So we set our goals to revolutionize our understanding of Shivasar B'Tammuz. And like I said, we're all looking forward to the Tanit already to be over. We have not yet had our coffee. We don't know what's going on. But hopefully by the time that the Shiur is finished, we will actually, next year, kind of in a way be looking forward to Shivasar B'Tammuz, because we'll know more about it. We'll know that it has the potential to change us that you can't believe. So there is a Mishnah in Masechet Ta'anit, it's on Chav Vav. And that's the Mishnah that settles everything for us. It tells us there were 5 tragedies that happened on Shivasar B'Tammuz. First one, of course, Nishtabaru HaLuchot. The Luchot were broken by Moshe Rabbeinu, and that date that it happened was Shivasar B'Tammuz. That's what we're commemorating today, the first of the 5 tragedies. Moshe came down from Har Sinai, he saw the Bnei Israel serving and worshiping this Egel HaZahav, this golden calf, which is clearly against the Torah, and he took those luchot with God's laws on them and he smashed them, and that was on the 17th of Tammuz. Number 2, Batel HaTamid. Tamid, there's a Korban Tamid. And the Korban Tamid was brought in the temple. And which temple was the Korban stopped? The Korban HaTamid? So, hang on. The exact date, if it's the first temple or second temple, you say, well, what difference does it make to us? They stopped bringing the Korban, and that was the tragedy. It's 1 out of 5. I don't relate to it too much. I don't bring Korbanot anymore. They stopped bringing it, and the question is, in which temple, first or second? And the reason it's important, if you ever read through the Sefer Daniel, they have many predictions about when Mashiach is going to come. It's going to be in 1350 years, 2300 years, whenever it's going to be. All those predictions are based from the time that the Korban HaTamid was stopped. That's what it was. So when was the Batel HaTamid? How many years from the Batel HaTamid? That's when Mashiach is going to come, the different predictions. So when did it stop? First of all, we have to know what it was that I'm talking about. What stopped? What was the tamid? Many of us, we read it every day. It's a description of the korban offering they used to bring in the Beit HaMikdash. And by learning and by talking about the korbanot that they would bring every day in the Beit HaMikdash, it's considered on some level as if we actually learned it. So when the temple stood, every morning they would take a sheep, one sheep, and they would slaughter it, and then every afternoon they would do the same thing, take another sheep. Et hakeves echad ta'aseh v'boker, v'hakeves hasheni ta'aseh ben harbaim. And this is something that we did all the time. So the Talmud Yerushalmi, remember we have two Talmuds. We have the Bavli, which is the main one, from Babylon, and they have one called Yerushalmi. It focuses more on the laws of Eretz Yisrael. And it says, on the 17th of Tammuz, the Goyim, the Gentiles came, and Batel HaTamid, and they stopped bringing the Korban HaTamid. Now, which temple was this in? That's my question. Was it the first temple or the second temple? So the Talmud Yerushalmi has a little bit of an argument about this. Surprised? Rav Shimon says it was the Greeks. Now, when did the Greeks rule in the Beit HaMikdash? First or second? Let's try it again. When did the Greeks rule? That was Hanukkah time. The second time. The beginning of the second period of the second temple was the Greeks. They didn't destroy the Beit HaMikdash. It was Hanukkah, right? So the Greeks in the time of the second temple, they abolished the Korban HaTamid. That's according to Rav Shimon in the Talmud Yerushalmi. So one opinion, it was keep this straight, it was the Greeks in the time of second temple. Rabbi Levi in the same Gemara says, no, you're right, it was the second temple, but it wasn't the Greeks. Who came after the Greeks and actually destroyed the temple? The Romans. So Rav Shimon said it was the Greeks in the times of the second temple. Rav Levi says no, it was the Romans in the time of the second temple. So we got a little bit of an argument. So what do? We look in the Rambam. You want to know anything? You look in the Rambam. The Rambam tells you, you're both wrong. It wasn't in the second temple. It was in the first temple. And it wasn't the Greeks and it wasn't the Romans. It was the Babylonians who just... So here you have it. 3 opinions about when they stopped to bring this korban every day. And that was considered such a tragedy that it's one of the 5 tragedies that happened on Shivasar B'Tammuz. And those 5 tragedies all lead to another set of 5 tragedies that maybe one day we can kind of compare them and see what's going on here. And that's the 5 tragedies of Tisha B'Av. So these things are all a precursor to the destruction of Beit HaMikdash. So item number 1, the luchot were broken. Item number 2, the second tragedy, they stopped bringing the Korban HaTamid. I can't tell you when, there's 3 opinions. Probably the Rambam makes a lot of sense, but the Yerushalmi has 2 other opinions. Whatever it was, they stopped. Item number 3, Ufka'ah ha'ir. The walls of Jerusalem were breached. In other words, there was a wall, and we used to live inside the city, and we were being attacked from the outside. Jerusalem, capital of Israel, you know there's a wall around it, right? At least the old city. And the walls were breached on the 17th of Tammuz in the second temple. That's what we're talking about over here. Hufka ha'ir. On the 17th of Tammuz, the walls were breached in the second temple. Now, if you came earlier, you got a little preview of this. What about in the first temple? The walls were also breached. And the Goyim also got in to destroy the destroy the first temple. When did they breach the walls in the first temple? Well, that's where you have an argument between the Talmud Bavli and the Talmud Yerushalmi that we heard a little bit about before. The Yerushalmi says it was also breached on the 17th of Tammuz. But the Bavli says, it's breached on the 9th of Tammuz. First temple. Second temple, everyone agrees, was breached. The walls were breached on the 17th. But in the first temple, so you have the Yerushalmi, the Talmud Yerushalmi, it was 17 Tammuz. First temple, it was 9th of Tammuz. So Tosafot asked the question right away, and he says, I don't get it. If you open a Tanakh, if you open the Bible, and you see the Navi Yirmiyah And the Navi says that in the times of the first temple, the walls were breached on the 9th. That's what it says in the Bible. That's what it says in the Tanakh, in our Torah. It tells us in the first temple it was breached on the 9th. But here you have the Yerushalmi saying, no, it was on the 17th. So that's really a startling question that we have to deal with. So what does a pasuk actually say? So Tosafot says they actually did breach the walls even in the first temple on the 17th. They were both breached on the 17th of Tammuz in both years. However, the Navi purposely wrote down the wrong date. What is the Navi? God's communicating to him. How does he write down something that's a lie? No, that's what God communicated to him. That's what God told him to do, and that's what he did. Really? Really? He wrote down the wrong date? We know it was 17th Tammuz, and they wrote down it was 9th of Tammuz? What's going on? So Tosafot says, well, it was such a confusing time. There was such unclarity. There was discombobulation. I don't know. Give me some good words over here. They were so confused. They were so foggy. They didn't know what was going on, that to preserve that unclarity of the time, that it was such a disaster, the Navi purposely recorded the wrong date. So that's how we justify the fact that it says the 9th of Tammuz in the Navi for the first temple, but the other Talmud says it was 17th, and Tosafot says everybody agrees it was 17th, but they wanted to preserve how tragic a situation it was, how messed up we were, that we didn't know what day it was. Could you imagine what kind of suffering the Jewish people were going through, that they couldn't even keep track of the dates, of the days, what's going on? That's the point that we want to make over here. So we had so far 3 items. We had the Egel, we had, we had the Luchot that were broken when Moshe saw the Egel, he broke it, Shivasar B'Tammuz. We had, what was the next thing? We had Batel Tamid. They stopped bringing the Korban Tamid. The city was surrounded, and once the city was surrounded, that was it. It was just, not long until the walls were breached and they got in, and that also happened on the 17th of Tammuz. The 4th thing was Apostamos burned a Sefer Torah. Now, Apostamos, do you know this name? You ever heard this name before? Apostamos, who was he? So, first of all, he was an evil Greek general. So, what period was he in? Which Beit HaMikdash? Must have been the beginning of the second. So when did he burn it? In the beginning of the second Beit HaMikdash in the times of the Greeks. What Sefer Torah did he burn? That's also a little bit of a discussion. Some say Ezra HaSofer had an authoritative Sefer Torah that was like the codex. Anyone that wanted to write a Sefer Torah, you checked it against that to make sure it's accurate, that every letter is there, every paragraph begins in its right place at right time. And that was what some people said, that he burned that authoritative Sefer Torah. That's like the codex. That's like the the tikkun. That was it. I mean, how are you going to write a kasher Sefer Torah without that? And other people said, well, no. Apostamos, he tried to burn all the Sifrei Torah that he can get his hands on that day. So that was the 4th thing. So let's review again. First one? Luchot. Second one? The Tamid, the Korban Tamid. They stopped bringing the sacrifice, the sheep in the morning, afternoon. Third one? The walls were breached. 4th one? Apostamos burned the Sefer Torah. And now we get to the 5th one. And the 5th one is also a very, very tragic thing. And let me see if I can find the actual source sheet. And the 5th one, what it says is they placed an idol in the Echal, in the Beit HaMikdash. They put an idol in the Echal. So it says, let's go back to the 4th one, the Saraf, Apostamos El HaTorah, that was number 4. And then number 5, Ve'emid Selem Ba'Echal. And He'emid, and he set up a idol in the Echal, in the Beit HaMikdash. Who set it up? Seems like it was the same guy, right? It doesn't say and they, the He'emid. And he set up a Sefer Torah in there. So that's the Peshat. that it was Apos Tammuz, he did 2 of the 5 tragedies. He burned Sefer Torah, maybe many Sefer Torah, we don't know. For sure he burned one, and that was a tragedy beyond belief, that take away our Torah. And he or someone, they set up a idol in the Tammuz. So that's what we say. That's the way we understand the Mishnah. But Rashi does not understand it that way. Rashi says, no, it wasn't Apos Tammuz who put the idol. He burned the Torah, yes, but Apos Tammuz was not the one, according to Rashi. So who did it? We did it. We used to have an evil king named Menashe. And Menashe was in which temple? First temple. So it looks like the Mishnah is teaching a random collection of 5 tragedies that all took place on Shivasar B'Tammuz. What were they again? The Luchot were broken, the Korban HaTamid was stopped, the Jerusalem city walls were breached in the second temple, probably the first temple also. They burned the Sefer Torah, Apos Tammuz, and an idol was put in the Echal. And so it really seems to be not only a random collection of different tragedies, but they're not in chronological order. If you remember, I kept saying, which Beit HaMikdash, which temple? They're not in order, because even if Apos Tammuz, what temple was he?
You said second.
It was the beginning of the Greek. And so that's the way it ends, and some of the stuff happened in the first, and some happened in the second, and the order that these happened in, if he's the Greek general, and that's before the destruction of second Beit HaMikdash, then why does he come as number 4 and maybe even number 5? It's out of order. It seems to be random. It seems to be not connected. And so my job is to ask, why would the tragedies listed be out of order? And so Rabbi Daniel Glatstein said, this is the reason why I'm bringing this. He said, it's not just a coincidence that 5 tragedies happened in different eras on 5 different dates, all 17th of Tammuz. He says there's a common theme to all of these, and we have to answer this. How are we going to answer it? You have to go to the parasha we read yesterday in the Bet Knesset. Which parasha was it yesterday? Balak. And Balak was the story of Balak and Bilam. And who was Bilam? Some say he was a descendant of Lavan Arami. He was from his family. Some say he wasn't really a descendant, he was a Gilgul. His neshama reincarnated from Lavan. Now it comes up to be a guy named Bilam. And other people say, You know who it was? It really was Lavan Harami. He lived a long time, and now he's just going by a different name, and but same guy, hates us, whatever it was. Bilam is trying to curse the Jewish people. And you heard, I'm sure if you came to the synagogue or wherever you were, you read, the Torah says God only wanted him to bless the Jewish people. So the Pasuk tells us, okay, God, you want me to bless the people. I'm not going to go to my normal sorcery that I normally do. There's a Pasuk that we read yesterday. Vayar Bilam, Hitov bene Adonai, levarech et Israel. So Bilam saw that it was good in the eyes of God to bless the Bnei Israel. V'lo halach kefam bepam likrat nechashim. So he didn't go to what he used to do. He used to get the snakes and used to do all kinds of, black magic with the serpents and the creepy crawlers. Vayasher el hamibar panav, and he gazed out to the desert. Bilam. In other words, he comes to curse us. God's telling him, don't curse. Okay, what does he do? He gazes out to the desert, and he's looking, and he's looking, and he's looking. And he figures if he's able to gaze out to the desert, that somehow he'll be able to curse the Jewish people. Question. What exactly was Bilam looking at in the desert? So, it's a great question. He's just gazing out into nothing. Now remember, when was Bilam? That was towards the end of our stay in the desert. When did the Luchot break? 39 years earlier in the beginning. So Targum Onkelos. Targum Onkelos. You've heard of Targum Onkelos? Okay, I want to tell you something about Targum Onkelos that's very important. Onkelos did not write Targum Onkelos. Onkelos was someone who came to join the Jewish people. He came from a very high family, but he received the tradition from Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. We know these guys, right, from the Haggadah. I'm on Rabbi Eliezer, and he received the tradition. Now, this tradition of Onkelos that he received from Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua was given at Har Sinai. So Onkelos, it's a transmission of what was said at Har Sinai. And by the way, you know that we're supposed to study every week the parasha with the Targum. So some people say Targum Onkelos, it's in Aramaic, I don't get it. Better to use Rashi, at least I'll understand it, I can read it in Hebrew or I can translate it in English. It's easier than the Targum. Well, some people say no, Targum is actually better. Why would the Targum be better if you don't even understand as much? Because it was given at Sinai and Rashi was not. Targum Onkelos is a transmission of what was given at Sinai. So why is it called Targum Onkelos? Okay, he didn't teach it, he just disseminated it. He learned it from Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. But, so that's how authoritative it is. It's even stronger than Rashi, in my opinion. So now comes along Onkelos, and he says, Bilam, what was he looking out in the desert? What was he gazing at? The place where we did the Egel all those years ago. He's gazing towards that area. He's looking to where we, the Jewish people, had mistakenly worshipped that Egel many years ago in the Midbar. And his gaze was like looking at the sin that we did. And he figured, if I really, really hone in on their sin, on the Egel, then I'll be able to attack Bnei Israel from that vantage point. In other words, Bilam had a fixation with the Egel. He was hired to come curse the Jewish people. What does he do? He starts thinking about a sin we made 39 years earlier. Why was he so fixated on the Egel? Any idea why? Why was he so interested in the Egel? Do you know who made the Egel? We think we know. So Onkelos has the tradition, okay, that that when Bilam was going to curse Bnei Israel, it says he took Shnei Ne'arav Imo. He took his Shnei Ne'arav. He took his two sons with him. And what were their names? Onkelos tells us it wasn't his two servants, it was his Ne'arav, his two Ne'arim, his two sons. And their names were Yanus and Yambrus. Yanus and Yambrus, or Yanis and Yambris. It depends on how you read the Aramaic. You can imagine the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. These guys were not big tzaddikim, they're big Rishayim, they're the sons of Bilam. And the Arizal says these two guys, Yanus and Yambrus, years earlier, they snuck into the Midbar, found the Jewish people, infiltrated, and then when things went wrong, they were the ones that actually constructed the Egel. The sons of Bilam, Yanus and Yambrus. That's the Arizal. I don't know how to say that. The Arizal says that. And so now we know why Bilam was so interested in the Egel. That's my boy. How do you say it in Yiddish? Shopping nachas, right? He's getting it everything. He was beaming the Aveirah that his kids did. He was so excited. I'm looking at that and I'm going to channel in on that. And the Arizal says they were the ones who built the Egel. Now, there's a pasuk in Tehillim. It says, "Vayamiru et kivodam betavnit shor ochel esev." You know what that means? Vayamiru et kivodam. We, the Jewish people, we exchange our kavod, our honor. What's our honor? Hashem. We exchange our honor. Vayamiru et kivodam betavnit shor, with the image of a ox. Okay? So the glory of God, our glory, kivodam is God, and we exchange God for the image of a shor. What's the next two words? Ochel esev. A shor, an ox, a calf that eats esev. What's esev? Grass. Okay. So, what's the pasuk talking about? The Egel HaZahav, right? We exchanged God for a cow. We exchanged our glory, b'tavnit shor, for the image of an ox, ochel esev, that eats grass. Any extra words in that pasuk? Any extra information we don't need in that pasuk? Do I care what the ox had for breakfast? Do I care that the ox is ochel esev? Now, what happens if the ox would eat barley? Would it be a different avera that we committed? So, when the pasuk says, "Vayamiru et kivodam b'tavnit shor," we exchanged our glory, the glory of God, for the glory of a ox, ochel esev. I don't need those last two words. An ox, who cares what the diet of the ox is? No. David HaMelech is teaching us something when he wrote the Tehillim. He's teaching us something crucial, ladies. Listen to this. And this is brought to us by the Arizal. Without the Arizal, we would never know this. Yes?
What number?
What number in Tehillim? In Tehillim, it is chapter 106, verse 20. How's that? I'm prepared.
Good job.
Thank you, Rabbi Glaskin. So what is Ochel Esev? King David is trying to tell us that the ox eats grass. He says, no. What date was it that Moshe Rabbeinu came down from the mountain with the luchot and broke them? What date? The date that he broke them. First one that we did. The first of the 5. Come on, how many times did I repeat it? 5 times we repeated it, at least, right? So the date that Moshe Rabbeinu came down with the luchot and broke them was Shivasar b'Tammuz, right? Now, we know when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Sinai, right? When was that? Shavuot, on Vav Sivan, right? And he came down 40 days later. And God says, you're not going to be happy with what you see. Moshe says, what's going on? God says, no. They don't need you anymore. They don't need you. They made a calf. Moshe says, let me see. So on the 17th of Tammuz, Moshe comes down. He witnesses the worshiping of the golden calf. And Moshe takes the luchot and he shatters him. Grass? Do we care? I'm going to tell you what grass is. How do you say grass in Hebrew? Esev. Sure. Ochel Esev. Esev is Rashi Tevot. Rashi Tevot means each letter stands for something else. Esev, Asar, Shiva, B'Tammuz. Switch it around. Shiva, Asar, B'Tammuz. Esev, Asar, Shiva, B'Tammuz. It was the 17th of Tammuz. That's Esev. It's a hint to us. So when it tells you we switched our kavod, God, and we get out of here, God, and we'll take the ox that eats Esev. David HaMelech was telling us, according to the Arizal, when that happened on Esev, Asar, Shiva B'Tammuz, Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. That's when it happened. And now I got to tell you something, that we are, basically, we get married to God on Shavuot through the Torah, right? When we receive the Torah. But we are like getting married to God through the Torah. Moshe is bringing the Torah down. God is the groom. Bnei Israel is the kala. The Torah is the ketubah. What was the chuppah? Come on, you heard this one. What was it?
The mountain.
Exactly right. God held the mountain over our heads. The first shotgun wedding ever. We were forced. God forced us to marry him. Yes, it was a forced marriage, and I'm admitting it right here. Later in Purim, we accepted everything that we accepted forcefully, we accepted willfully. But here we accepted it forcefully. You know why? The Maharshal in the Yam Shel Shlomo says, I'll tell you why. There's the halacha. If a man is me'anes a woman, a man, let's say he rapes her or he forces her to do something, he must marry her, and he's never allowed to divorce her, ever. So God was forcing us in this same type of thing. If we had not been forced with the mountain over our head as a chuppah, then God could have gotten rid of us. But he married us, so to speak, Klal Yisrael, with the chuppah of the mountain over our heads, so that we're ma'anes. So that's it. You can never get rid of us. So God coerced us, and He can never get rid of us. Do you ever notice at some weddings and some circles, the parents, they march down with torches? That's to remind you of the original chuppah at Har Sinai, where the mountain was ablaze and everything. Also, you ever notice at a wedding, the rabbi says the beracha. He says, Al yedei chuppah, finish it. Al yedei chuppah v'kiddushin. We are having a Jewish wedding with chuppah and kiddushin. You ever go to a Jewish wedding? Which comes first, the kiddushin or the chuppah? The kiddushin is the first aspect. You don't need a chuppah for the giving of the ring. The first item is kiddushin and then chuppah. So why are we saying it backwards? So the answer is, when God married us, first He held the mountain over our heads, and then He gave us the kiddushin. He gave us, the item of value. So since God did it backwards, we still have to do it forwards the right way. But when we say the bracha, al yedei kiddushin v'chuppah, we say, we'll switch it around. Al yedei chuppah v'kiddushin. Okay, all right, enough of that. How about another one on weddings? Did you ever notice that we break a glass at every wedding? Yeah. How come? Everyone says Qurban. Any other reasons? You bought that? You guys are all good with that reason? It's a good reason. It's a good reason. I like it. I've said it many times too. But every chatuna is to recall the original wedding at Har Sinai. The original wedding, what happened? The Torah was broken. The luchot were broken. So because the Torah, the luchot were smashed, we smashed a glass at a wedding to remember that original. You don't say that one at weddings too much. It's not so nice. But so when God was busy marrying us, we were busy doing the most despicable thing possible. Imagine the chatan is waiting under the chuppah for the kala, and she's out messing around with someone else. That would be pretty terrible. That's what we were doing. We were messing around with the egel. We're worshiping a calf. We're playing games over there. We're serving the egel. And that's what Moshe saw. And that's why, you know what Moshe Rabbeinu did with the egel? Ground it up. And then what did he do? You don't know this part? He mixed it with the water. And what did he do with it? He gave it to us to drink. Who else takes a drink when they do something terrible? The Sultan. Moshe Rabbeinu was checking us to see, were we involved? A lot of us were, but not all of us were. Gave us to drink, wanted to see. If we were guilty, that's it, finished, you're over. If not, you're okay. Moshe Rabbeinu was checking us. You want proof? Come Friday night, we read Shiur Shirim. Ad she'amelech bimsibo nirdi natan recho. When the king was still at his party, the king, God, was still at his party, he was at his wedding, nirdi natan recho, we gave off a foul smell. And the Gemara says, what is this talking about? Who's the king? King is God. What was the part of his marriage? What was the foul smell? The egel. We were serving the egel. We stunk. After the chuppah, we're busy with a cow. Of course you're going to stink. Ad shehamelech bimsibo. When the king was still at his party. Let's go back to our Rashi Tavot again. Ad shehamelech bimsibo. Ayin. Shin. Bet. What does it spell? Esev. And what does Esev spell? Shivasar b'Tammuz. So this is all starting to connect. It's pretty interesting, right? Okay. Now, there was a great rabbi, and this is the whole point of today. I can go for a long time, but everybody's, Tanit, and it's hot outside. There was a rabbi, he was known by a sefer called Aruch Laner. He was Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger, a fantastic rabbi in the 19th century. I particularly am impressed by him because he was, I believe, the first Chacham rabbi that got a university degree. And he had to leave the university. It started all kinds of riots, the rabbi being there, and all kinds of anti-Semitism and stuff. But he wrote another book on Chumash called Minchat Ani, a very important book. And he says over there, the whole point of what I want to make today, and I'm again so grateful to Rabbi Gladstein in his book, The Darkness and the Dawn for pointing this out. And I never would have known this. I never would have even thought of this. And he says, our 5 tragedies that happened on Shiva Asar Tammuz, we ask if they're random because they're out of order. And so it seems maybe they're just random. They're certainly not in chronological order. They didn't even happen in the same era. He says, no, it's not a collection of 5 random tragedies. Moshe broke the luchot, the korban hatamid stopped, the walls of the city were breached, Afos Tammuz burnt the Torah, they put a tselem, they put an idol in the Echal. He says what it is. This is a 5-pronged downward spiral in Jewish history. These 5 items, in the order that our Mishnah listed them, is telling you how did we get to the point where we got to today. How did we get to the point that it led to the 5 items destroying the Beit HaMikdash once and twice on Tisha B'Av? How do we make sure this never happens again? Does anyone know the actual statistic of intermarriage here in the United States? Jewish and non-Jewish? Over 50?
Probably 80.
It's 70% for Jewish women who are getting married to non-Jews. That's just the women, it's 70%. How many men marry non-Jewish women? That adds to it. But they tracked Jewish women and who they married, and they came out with 70%. 7 out of 10 weddings that occur where the bride is Jewish marries a goy. And I guarantee you that all of them, their grandfathers or great-grandfathers, were very religious, probably rabbis, probably big rabbis. And here you have a generation that they don't know who Avraham Avinu is. That's American Jewry. How did we get to the point where Jewish kids do not know the words Shema Yisrael? How does that happen? How can you have kids in Israel today, a Jewish father and a Jewish mother, and they can't tell you the difference between an Avraham Avinu and a Joe Biden? They can't. They can't. They don't know the difference. They're Jewish, their parents are Jewish. They don't know anything. So Rav Yaakov Ettinger says our Mishnah is giving us a step-by-step approach of what happens to us as Jews. What happens? How is it that the great-grandson gets so completely alienated when his great-grandfather was probably a very big tzaddik? And he says it happens in 5 steps. And the 5 steps are the 5 steps that I pounded into you over and over and over again this morning. Step number 1, the luchot are shattered. Of course I pray with the minyan. I wouldn't think of not praying with the minyan. I never miss minyan. Okay, sometimes I even come early and I read the Patach Eliyahu. I open my cloth and I read it. I'm so religious, and I stay afterwards and I read my Tehillim, but I have no time to go to a Shiur. I daven in the minyan. Who has time to learn? There's no time for Gemara. There's no time for Shiurim. That's the first thing that goes, and that starts the whole 5 steps of the tragedy. I don't have time to learn. I'm going to go pray, and I'm going to be shuckling back and forth 100 miles an hour. I'm going to get the best looking etrog and lulav that money can buy, and I'm going to build the nicest sukkah, and I'm going to do everything for Judaism, but I can't go to a shiur. I don't have time. I'm busy. That's the first step of Jewish disaster. Yishtabru haluchot. When we start slacking in limud haTorah. Second step,
Tamid.
Batela Tamid. Tamid means every day. It's Tamid. In the everyday service of Hashem. What happens? I skip minyan. Maybe for mincha, 1 day a week. Then I skip maybe Tuesday and Wednesday. We don't have Sefer Torah. So I skip. I'm talking to myself. My wife is laughing at me, you know. And, then nighttime, I'm tired, go back. I just got home from work at 6 o'clock. Now 7:40, the rabbi wants me back in synagogue tonight. There's no way I'm getting out of this chair. I just got, I'm not going, And, and then, okay, so I don't go Monday and Thursday when they have Sefer Torah. And then, okay, maybe sometimes, but Shabbat I go. But maybe I don't go Friday night. Or maybe I don't go Saturday night. Shabbat I go. What's going to happen when these children see that that's what their parents are doing, well, my dad goes every Shabbat morning, but not other times. You know what? I'll go every time they announce Rosh Chodesh once a month. That's when I'm going to go. But I definitely won't miss Yom Tov, and I'm definitely never going to miss Rosh Hashanah, Kippur, or at least I'm not going to miss the shofar for Ne'ilah. And eventually they have no connection with anything. And the flame starts to wither away, and that's Batela Tamid. It goes. And when it goes, what's the next thing? Hufka ha'ir. The walls are breached. There's a pasuk in Kohelet that says, Ir ketana v'anashim ba me'at. We, the Jewish people, were considered like a small city. We have a wall around us. We have this wall around us. We're open. We're vulnerable to the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara comes in and he burns down our Torah. And he burns it down. How do you do that? We let him in because we didn't have shiurim. We didn't keep up our tamid, our praying every day with the minyan, and we let them in. Once we stop doing those things, the wall around us, our wall gets breached, and that's what's going on over here. And the next thing you know, the Yetzer Hara comes, and he burns the Torah. Saraf afostamos et Torah. Our little city with only a few inhabitants, we let them in. The wall got knocked down. They came in and they burned our Torah. That's it. You don't have Torah anymore. You're going downhill. And what's the last thing that happens? You know what? The grandson of the guy from who was the grandfather was a tzaddik in the old country. The grandson is still wearing the Magen David at least, but the great grandson, he's got something different around his neck. He's got something completely different hanging from his neck, a different idol, a different icon, a different religion. And you know where it all started from? From the great-grandfather, who was slacking a little bit by not going to a shiur, by not going to learn, and not going to all the different minyanim. It's a 5-step downward process in the 3 weeks. If you want to know why we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, if you want to know why we have 3 weeks of tragedy, it starts by us not taking Judaism seriously. We want the good parts. We want the nice meals with the singing and the Torah. But there's a whole lot that's behind that. And we have to encourage everyone that we know to stay steadfast in this. How does it start? I can tell you how it starts for many people. They come. I don't know if I want to get into this or not, but they come and they have this little device over here, and they have to bring it with them to a shiur. Have to bring it to a shiur, and they leave it on. Why? Okay, I'll put it on vibrate, and then you're looking at your phone because who's going to call you? Who's going to call? Who's going to call? I'm waiting for that important call that can't wait. It hasn't come in yet. But my wife might need me. I was home all day, and I didn't do a thing to help her then. So now that I'm in shul, I have to be ready to go help my wife? Let's be reasonable. Come on, it just doesn't work that way. So what's the problem? Instead of coming to shiur for an hour, and learning an hour straight, we learn 30 seconds, then we get a WhatsApp, and then we learn 10 seconds, and we get a text. I hope I'm not offending anybody here. And then we learn 15 seconds, then it's an email, and then 10 seconds, then it's a notification. So how long did you learn? You never learn for more than a minute straight. And that's what's going on over here. The first step of Judaism is Torah. It has to be real. I'll just end with the story. I think we told it a couple years ago about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva goes off to learn Torah. His wife tells him, go to yeshiva and study Torah. Go. And he goes away, becomes a big rabbi, and he comes back after 12 years, and he's coming close to his home. He missed his kid's bar mitzvah. His wife is going to PTA all by herself. She makes this big chamin every week, and there's no one to eat it. And he's getting close to the house, and he hears a neighbor shouting at Mrs. Rachel, Mrs. Akiva, what kind of husband do you have anyways? He goes off and he leaves you and he learns like that, and you go to the PTA by yourself, there's no one to eat, there's no one to take care of you. And she says, if I had my way, he'd turn around this second and go right back and learn for another 12 years. Rabbi Akiva heard that. And he turned around and he went back to learn for another 12 years. Now, what's going on over here, ladies? Wouldn't it be nice, Derech Eretz, wife, thank you so much for allowing me to go learn. I'm going to go for another 12 years, but when I come back, I'm going to be the best husband ever. I'm even going to take out the garbage without you asking me. I'm going to do shopping. I'm going to pick up my socks, and I'm going to do everything that I'm supposed to do. And he doesn't do that. He doesn't have the derech eretz to even say hi. He overhears his wife. He knows it's his wife, and he turns around straight back to yeshiva. What kind of man does that? So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz asked that question, and he says, I'll tell you what he was doing. It would have been nice if he said, hi honey, how's everything? But you know what? He turns around and he goes back to yeshiva. And famously he says, because how long had Rabbi Akiva learned up to this point? 12 years. And if he would have talked to his wife and then gone back, and he would have learned another 12 years, 12 and 12 does not equal the same as learning 24 years straight. It's the continuity, it's the straight learning. It says, when it comes to learning, the main benefit of learning Torah is consistency. It's the uninterrupted time. It's the consecutive 12 years here and 12 years here. It's not 24 years. That's like 12 years here and 12 years there. It's good. But 24 years together, it's got to be so much better. And so if that's true for Rabbi Akiva, then us with 30 seconds here and 45 seconds there, it's not all that valuable. So I just want to tell you that we can go on for a lot more, but I see we've taken quite a lot of time, and it's a time need. So I'm going to let everyone come up and take a look at the book. I'm here for questions if anyone wants to ask. If I ever really am planning on helping my wife at home, you can come and ask my wife if that's true, and we'll see about that. And I want to wish you all some kal, and thank you so much. We should be zocher to see the rebuilding of Beit HaMikdash in our days, and Mashiach should come b'mehera b'yameinu. Amen.